Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. I used to believe that love could endure anything, that if you gave your all, stayed loyal, and worked hard, your marriage would stand strong. But love is not enough when it's one-sided. Lindsay and I had been together for 7 years, married for 5. When we first met, she was this firecracker of a woman, always laughing, always the center of attention. She could light up a room with her energy, and I loved that about her. I was quieter, more reserved, but I felt lucky to have someone like her by my side. Somewhere along the way, though, that energy turned against me. At first, it was little things. The way she corrected me in front of our friends, making sure everyone knew when I got a detail wrong in a story. The jokes at my expense, subtle at first, then more biting. Jake's a great guy, but let's be real, he's not the brains of this operation. People would chuckle. I would smile along. Then came the comparisons. She'd tell stories about her ex-boyfriends, usually when she had a drink in her hand. Brandon used to surprise me with flowers all the time. Spontaneous gestures. It's the little things that keep a relationship alive. I'd nod, pretending it didn't sting. It was always public. That was the worst part. If I tried to talk to her about it privately, she'd laugh it off. Oh, come on, Jake. I'm just messing around. Don't be so sensitive. I started noticing the way people looked at me when she spoke. The forced laughs, the awkward glances. They knew, but no one ever said anything. I told myself it wasn't that bad, that every marriage had rough patches, that maybe I was just imagining things. But then came the night of the family barbecue. The night I could no longer ignore it. We were at her parents' place, one of those big, open backyard parties where everyone drank too much and stayed too late. I was manning the grill, flipping burgers, when Lindsay strolled over, beer in hand, already buzzing. "Oh, look at my husband, the master chef," she called out. I swear, it's the only thing he's ever fully committed to. I laughed it off, trying to focus on the food. "I mean, really," she went on, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. "The man can fix a car, but can't figure out how to fix his career. If it weren't for me, he'd still be changing oil at that rundown garage." People chuckled nervously. I felt my face flush. She wasn't done. "Honestly, sometimes I think I'm married potential instead of a man." Silence. A few people shifted uncomfortably. I could feel my ears burning, my grip tightening on the spatula. Something inside me cracked. I set the spatula down, wiped my hands on my jeans, and turned to her. "Lindsay, do you even like me?" My voice was calm, but I could hear the tension in it. Her smile faltered. "What? Of course I like you. Don't be so dramatic." "No," I said, my voice firmer now. "I'm serious. Because from where I'm standing, it feels like I'm just the joke you tell at parties." A hush fell over the backyard. Her father cleared his throat. Her mother suddenly found great interest in the tablecloth. Lindsay scoffed, shaking her head. "Oh, come on, Jake. Don't be such a baby." That was it. I stepped back, nodded slowly, and said, "Got it." Then I turned and walked inside the house. I don't know how long I stood in the bathroom, staring at my reflection, heart pounding. But I knew one thing. This wasn't just Lindsay being playful. This was Lindsay showing me exactly what she thought of me. And I was finally listening. I should have left that night. I should have walked out of that barbecue and never looked back. But that's the thing about emotional abuse. It creeps in so slowly that by the time you realize you're drowning, you've already convinced yourself you can breathe underwater. The morning after the barbecue, Lindsay acted like nothing had happened. She hummed to herself as she made coffee, scrolling through her phone at the kitchen counter. "Do you want eggs?" she asked without looking up. I stared at her, waiting for an apology, an acknowledgement, anything. She just kept scrolling. My chest tightened. "Do you even remember what you said last night?" She sighed dramatically and set her phone down. "Jake, I was joking. Everyone knew it was a joke. You're the only one making a big deal out of it." I clenched my jaw. "A joke," I repeated. "Calling me a failure in front of your entire family was just a joke." She rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, are we really doing this?" "Fine, I'm sorry if your feelings got hurt, but you're being way too sensitive." There was again. The same cycle. She pushed, I hurt, she dismissed. I should have walked away, but I stayed. That night, we went out with friends. I didn't want to go, But Lindsay insisted. Come on, you need to get out. Maybe you'll loosen up a little. The bar was packed loud, filled with music and laughter. Lindsay was in her element, moving effortlessly through the crowd, hugging friends, laughing at jokes that weren't funny. I sat at the table, nursing a beer, trying to shake the feeling in my gut. And it started again. Jake's such a homebody, she said to the group, nudging me with her elbow. He'd live in a garage if I let him. People laughed. I forced a smile. And don't even get me started on his work ethic. She grinned, sipping her drink. He takes forever to finish anything. I swear, if we ever renovate our house, I'll have to hire someone just to make sure it gets done before I die of old age. Laughter again, louder this time. Someone clapped me on the back. Come on, man. Don't let her roast you like that. I tried to brush it off, but my ears burned. Lindsay kept going. I mean, I love him, but sometimes I feel like I married a guy who still hasn't figured out what he wants to be when he grows up. Something inside me snapped. The tension that had been building for years reached its breaking point. I set my beer down with more force than I intended. You know what, Lindsay? My voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. I don't think you actually love me. I think you love having someone to look down on. The table went quiet. Someone awkwardly cleared their throat. Lindsay blinked, clearly not expecting me to push back. Excuse me. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. I get it now. You don't respect me. You never have. And honestly, I'm done pretending it doesn't hurt. She laughed, but it was forced, a little too high-pitched. Oh my God, Jake. Are you serious right now? Dead serious. I stood up, tossing some cash on the table. You can stay and keep entertaining everyone at my expense. I'm going home. Lindsay's smile faltered. I saw it then, the flicker of panic in her eyes. But I didn't wait for a response. I walked out of the bar and didn't look back. By the time I got home, my hand was still shaking. I sat on the couch, staring at the wall, trying to piece together everything I'd just done. Lindsay had spent years breaking me down, one joke at a time, and I had let her. But tonight, for the first time, I had fought back. She came home an hour later. I expected yelling, accusations, maybe even tears. Instead, she was eerily calm. She set her purse down and folded her arms. What the hell was that? I kept my voice steady. That was me finally standing up for myself. She scoffed. Oh, please. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. I let out a humorless laugh. Embarrassed you? Lindsay, you humiliate me every chance you get. But I'm the problem. She rolled her eyes. You're overreacting. There it was again. The dismissal. The gaslighting. I exhaled slowly, running a hand down my face. I don't think I can do this anymore, I said quietly. Her expression hardened. Do what? This. I gestured between us. I can't keep being the punchline in my own marriage. For a second, I thought I saw real fear in her eyes. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by something cold. Oh, please, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. You wouldn't leave me. You couldn't. I didn't respond. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't so sure she was right. I barely slept that night. Even after Lindsay stormed off to the bedroom and slammed the door, my mind wouldn't stop racing. I kept replaying the bar scene, the way people had laughed, the way Lindsay had looked at me when I finally fought back. That flicker of something in her eyes. Was it fear? Guilt? Or just the realization that I was slipping out of her control? I didn't know. But I knew one thing. I was done pretending everything was fine. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Lindsay moving around the kitchen. She didn't say anything when I walked in, just sipped her coffee and stared at her phone. The tension between us was thick, but she acted like nothing had happened, like I hadn't called her out in front of everyone. That was her move. Ignore it, bury it, pretend it never happened. But not this time. We need to talk, I said, leaning against the counter. She didn't look up. I'm Busse. I exhaled sharply. Lindsay. She finally glanced at me, her expression unreadable. What? I hesitated, feeling the weight of the words I was about to say. Last night made me realize something. You don't respect me, and I can't keep living like this. She scoffed, setting her mug down a little too hard. Oh my God, are you still on this? Jake, I was joking. That's what people do in relationships. They joke. You're blowing this way out of proportion. No, I'm not. My voice was firm, steadier than I felt. You tear me down every chance you get. You make me feel small. And I let you because I thought that's just how things were. But I can't anymore. She rolled her eyes, crossing her arms. So what? You're threatening to leave. I don't know, I admitted, but something has to change. For a split second, she looked uneasy. It was subtle, but I caught it. And that's when I knew she never thought I'd push back. She thought I'd take it forever. She picked up her phone again, scrolling aimlessly. Whatever, Jake. You're being dramatic. I studied her, waiting for some kind of real reaction. But there was nothing. No apology, no attempt to fix things. Just the same cold dismissal. I left for work feeling more certain than ever that our marriage was on its last legs. That night, Lindsay went out with her friends. She didn't ask if I wanted to come, didn't even tell me where she was going. Just grabbed her purse and left without a word. I watched the door close behind her, something heavy settling in my chest. A few hours later, I found myself cleaning. It wasn't something I usually did this late, but I needed something to keep my hands busy. I started in the kitchen, wiping down counters, scrubbing the sink. Then I moved to the living room, folding blankets, straightening up. But when I got to our bedroom, something stopped me. Lindsay's closet was slightly open. I stared at it for a moment, that same uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. There was no reason for me to go through her things, but my gut told me something was off. I pulled the door open all the way, looking at the neat rows of shoes, the dresses hanging perfectly in place. It was all normal. But then I noticed something on the top shelf. A small, unmarked box. My stomach twisted. I had never seen it before. I reached for it slowly, my hands suddenly clammy. The lid came off easily, and the first thing I saw was a sleek, expensive-looking watch. Not mine. I frowned, setting it aside. Underneath was a receipt from a jewelry store, one I'd never been to. And at the bottom, tucked beneath a folded piece of paper, was a hotel key card. A cold wave of realization crashed over me. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring at the items in my hands. The watch, the receipt, the hotel key. Pieces of a puzzle I hadn't wanted to solve. Lindsay was cheating on me. My knees felt weak. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my mind racing. The late nights. The sudden change in how she treated me. The way she dismissed me like I was nothing. It had all been leading to this. I unfolded the paper with shaky hands. It was a note, written in someone else's handwriting. Can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing. No name. Just a message that confirmed everything I was dreading. I felt sick. I had spent years letting Lindsay chip away at me, making excuses for her cruelty, convincing myself that I just needed to try harder, be better. But none of it had mattered, because she had already decided I wasn't enough. I didn't move for a long time. The weight of betrayal settled over me like a suffocating blanket. My mind bounced between anger, grief, disbelief. I wanted to scream, to break something, to confront her the second she walked through the door. But then another thought crept in. If I exploded now, she'd just lie, twist things, make me doubt what I had seen with my own eyes. No, I needed proof. I put everything back exactly as I found it, closed the closet door, and stood there, breathing hard. Lindsay thought she had me figured out. She thought I'd keep taking it, keep being the fool in her little game. But she had no idea what was coming. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that watch, that receipt, that hotel key. My mind raced, replaying every cruel remark Lindsay had made, every moment I had ignored my gut. It all made sense now. The humiliation, the belittling, the way she had whittled me down to nothing. It had all been leading up to this. I had spent years trying to be a good husband, convincing myself that love meant enduring the bad times. But this wasn't a rough patch. This was a betrayal so deep that I felt like I was drowning in it. By the time morning came, I had a plan. Lindsay was still asleep when I slipped out of bed. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my coffee, my hands wrapped around the mug to keep them from shaking. If I confronted her now, she would lie. She would cry, twist the truth, make me the villain. No, I needed undeniable proof. I needed to catch her in the act, to make it so painfully clear that even she wouldn't be able to gaslight her way out of it. I spent my lunch break at work researching GPS trackers. I found one that was small, easy to hide, and linked directly to an app on my phone. It wasn't cheap, but the price didn't matter. I needed to know. After work, I drove to an electronics store across town, paid in cash, and tucked the tracker into my pocket like it was some kind of weapon. When I got home, Lindsay was getting ready to go out. Going somewhere? I asked casually, leaning against the doorway. She barely spared me a glance as she applied her lipstick. Yeah, girls' night. I told you about it. She hadn't, but that didn't surprise me. Right? I said, watching her reflection in the mirror. Where at? She smirked at me through the glass. Why? Gonna come check up on me? I forced a chuckle. Nah, just making conversation. She rolled her eyes. Relax, Jake. You act like I'm out here committing crimes. I stared at her, my pulse hammering. Yeah, I murmured. Imagine that. She left 10 minutes later. I waited by the window, watching her walk to the car, making sure she wasn't coming back for something she forgot. The second she pulled out of the driveway, I moved. I grabbed the GPS tracker and went outside, my heart pounding. Her car was spotless, as always. Lindsay took pride in keeping it looking brand new. I crouched down, feeling along the underside of the bumper until I found a secure spot. I pressed the tracker into place, listening for the small click that told me it was activated. Then I stepped back, wiping my palms on my jeans, and took a deep breath. It was done. I went back inside, pulled out my phone, and opened the app. A small blinking dot appeared on the screen, marking Lindsay's location as she drove toward whatever lie she had planned for tonight. I sat on the couch, watching that little dot move. Time crawled. My stomach churned. She stopped at a restaurant across town. Not one she usually went to, not one she had ever mentioned before. I clenched my fists, imagining her sitting at a table with him, laughing, touching his arm, whispering things she never said to me anymore. I needed more. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. By the time I got to the restaurant, I felt like I was vibrating. I parked down the street, far enough away that she wouldn't see me, and walked toward the building. I kept my head down, moving quickly. When I reached the windows, I scanned the tables, my stomach twisting in knots. And there she was. Lindsay sat in a booth near the back, twirling her hair around her finger, smiling in a way she hadn't smiled at me in years. Across from her sat a man I didn't recognize, tall, dark hair, expensive-looking suit. He reached across the table, ran his fingers over her wrist, and she didn't pull away. She laughed at something he said, leaning in just slightly, her lips parting like she was hanging on his every word. I couldn't breathe. I pulled my phone from my pocket, my hand shaking, and snapped a few pictures. It wasn't enough. I needed more. I stepped inside, keeping my head low, moving toward the bar where I had a clear view of them. The bartender asked if I wanted a drink, but I ignored him. My focus was on Lindsay, on the way she kept touching this guy, on the way she looked at him like he was the most fascinating person in the world. And then it happened. The man slid something across the table, a small black box. A gift. Lindsay's eyes lit up, and she opened it, pulling out a delicate bracelet. She gasped, eyes wide with excitement, and I felt something inside me snap. I had seen that reaction before. On Christmas mornings, on anniversaries, on the nights when I used to surprise her just because it used to be for me. Now it was for him. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. I took another picture, making sure I captured the moment her fingers brushed against his as he helped fasten the bracelet around her wrist. Then I turned and walked out. The cool night air hit me like a slap. I leaned against the wall, inhaling deep, trying to stop the shaking. I had the proof now. I had everything I needed, but I wasn't ready to confront her yet. No, I had something else in mind. Lindsay thought she was untouchable, that she could humiliate me, control me, break me down until I was nothing. But she had underestimated me. She had no idea what was coming. I drove home in silence, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The proof was right there on my phone. The photos of Lindsay, the way she leaned into him, the way her fingers lingered on his wrist. The little black box with the bracelet, the kind of gift a man gives a woman when he's trying to impress her, when he wants to claim her. I pulled into the driveway and just sat there, staring at the house we had built together. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a cage, a place where I had been slowly suffocating while Lindsay walked all over me. Not anymore. Inside, I went straight to my desk, powered up my laptop, and started digging. The GPS tracker would give me a log of everywhere she went. That was step one. Step two was going through our finances. Lindsay wasn't the type to be careful. She had gotten too comfortable, too confident. It didn't take long to find a few hotel charges she hadn't bothered to hide, restaurants I'd never heard of, expensive purchases that didn't add up. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, my heart pounding. She wasn't just cheating. She was funding her little affair with our money. That should have sent me into a blind rage, but it didn't. If anything, it made me sharper, focused. I wasn't just going to catch her. I was going to make her regret every single second she had spent making a fool out of me. Lindsay came home late, just like I knew she would. I heard the door close, the sound of her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. I stayed in the office, keeping my breathing steady. She popped her head in, phone still in her hand. "Hey," she said casually, like she hadn't spent the night wrapped up in another man's attention. I turned to look at her, forcing a small smile. "Hey, how was girls' night?" She shrugged, walking over to the mirror by the door, adjusting her hair. "Fun. Nothing crazy." I watched her, waiting to see if she'd slip up, if she'd show even a flicker of guilt. But there was nothing. "That's good," I said. "You deserve a break." She turned to face me, raising an eyebrow. "That's new. Normally, you just sulk when I go out." I chuckled, shaking my head. "Nah, I've been thinking. I've been too uptight lately. Maybe it's time I loosen up a little." She studied me for a second like she wasn't sure if I was messing with her. Then she smirked. "Yeah, you should." She left the room, humming to herself. I waited until I heard the shower running before I grabbed my phone. I pulled up the number I had saved earlier in the night, the band's tour manager. It had taken me a few hours of searching, but I had found him. Lindsay had no idea that her little VIP treatment came with a paper trail, that every backstage pass she had gone through this guy. I wasn't sure if he knew what was going on between her and the lead singer, but I was about to make sure he did. The phone rang twice before he answered. "Hello." I kept my voice even. "Hey, my name's Jake. I think we have a mutual acquaintance." There was a pause. "Okay. My wife, Lindsay." Another pause. Longer this time. "Right. What's this about?" I smiled to myself. He already knew something was off. "Look, man, I'm not here to start problems for you. I just want to confirm something. She's been getting a lot of VIP passes. Special treatment. That's coming from the lead singer, right?" A sigh. Then, "I don't know what you want me to say." "That's not a denial." "Look, dude, I don't need details." I cut in. "I already know what's going on. I just need to know if she's on the list for the next concert." A beat of silence. Then, "Yeah, she's got a backstage pass." I exhaled slowly. "Perfect. I'll be there too." Before he could say anything else, I hung up. The next few days were a blur. I played my part well, acting normal, smiling at Lindsay like nothing had changed. If anything, I was nicer to her, more attentive. She didn't question it. She just soaked up the attention like she deserved it, oblivious to the fact that I had already set her downfall in motion. On the night of the concert, Lindsay kissed me on the cheek before leaving. "Don't wait up," she teased. I grinned. Wouldn't dream of it. I waited a full hour before heading to the venue. I had already arranged everything with the tour manager. He didn't want to be involved, but once I told him exactly what Lindsay had been doing, sneaking off during road trips, lying about girls' weekends, using those backstage passes to screw around on a tour bus, he agreed to help. I stood in the crowd, waiting for the moment. The band played, the energy was high, and then, right before the encore, the stage lights dimmed. The massive screen behind them flickered to life. And there it was, security footage from the tour bus. Lindsay and the lead singer. The crowd erupted in noise, gasps, boos, confused murmurs. The band froze on stage. The lead singer turned, his face draining of color as he realized exactly what was playing behind him. And Lindsay? She was standing off to the side, holding her VIP pass like a badge of honor, until she saw the screen. Her face twisted in horror. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She spun around, searching for someone to explain how this was happening. That's when I stepped forward. She spotted me instantly, her eyes going wide. I lifted my phone and waved. She pushed through the crowd, panic written all over her face. "Jake, what the hell is this?" I shrugged. "Looks like a behind-the-scenes feature." People started pointing, whispering. The energy in the room had shifted completely. Security was already on the move, escorting the lead singer off stage, but Lindsay was still standing there, frozen, as the footage looped. She turned back to me, eyes wild. "You did this." I tilted my head. "What was it you said the other night? You act like I'm out here committing crimes." I leaned in, my voice low enough that only she could hear. "Well, sweetheart, looks like you just got caught." She shook her head, hands trembling. "Jake, please, we can fix this." "Oh, we're fixing it." I smiled. Started with a divorce. Before she could say another word, I turned and walked away. I didn't stay to watch the rest of the fallout. I didn't need to. I drove home in absolute silence. No music, no distractions, just the distant hum of the tires against the pavement. My hands were steady on the wheel, my breathing even. I had thought I'd feel more, rage, satisfaction, maybe even regret. But there was nothing, just an eerie kind of calm, like my body had finally given up on the fight it had been trapped in for years. Lindsay had humiliated me for so long, picked me apart piece by piece until I barely recognized myself. But tonight, I had taken my power back. She had walked into that concert thinking she was untouchable, the queen of her own little kingdom. And I had burned it to the ground. I pulled into the driveway, turned off the engine, and just sat there for a moment. My house, the one I had worked so hard to make a home, looked different now. Or maybe I was the one who had changed. Either way, I knew this was no longer a place I wanted to be. I stepped inside, flicking on the kitchen light, the quiet settling around me like a second skin. I poured myself a drink, the ice clinking against the glass, and took a slow sip. The whiskey burned, but it was a good kind of burn, the kind that reminded me I was still here, still standing. Then I heard it, the frantic sound of tires screeching into the driveway, a car door slamming, then pounding on the front door. "Jake." Lindsay's voice was raw, desperate. "Open the door." I didn't move. More pounding. "Jake, please." I sighed, setting my glass down. This was inevitable. I took my time walking over, unlocking the door with an almost lazy flick of my wrist. When I pulled it open, Lindsay stood there, her makeup streaked down her face, her hair disheveled. She looked nothing like the untouchable woman she had pretended to be all these years. Her eyes searched mine, looking for something, an ounce of weakness, a sign that she still had control over me. But there was nothing left for her to hold on to. "What do you want, Lindsay?" My voice was steady, unreadable. She let out a shaky breath. "Jake, what the hell was that?" I raised an eyebrow. "That," I gestured vaguely. That was the truth finally coming to light. Her hands balled into fists. "You ruined my life." A dry laugh escaped me. "No, Lindsay, you did that all on your own." She stepped forward, reaching for me, but I moved back just enough that her hands caught nothing but air. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "We can fix this." I tilted my head. "You mean I can fix this? You want me to clean up the mess you made, just like I've been doing for years?" Her lip trembled. "Jake, I wasn't thinking straight. It was just a stupid mistake. Stop." My voice was firm, cutting through her excuses. A mistake is one bad choice. A mistake is something you regret before you get caught. You didn't make a mistake, Lindsay. You made a decision. Over and over again. She shook her head, her breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps. "I was lonely, Jake. You were so distant. You made me feel like I wasn't wanted." I stared at her, that eerie calm still settling in my bones. "You humiliated me for years. Made me feel like I was never good enough. And the second I started pulling away, you ran to someone else. Do you even hear yourself?" Tears spilled down her cheeks, but they meant nothing to me. "I love you," she whispered. I almost laughed. "You don't love me. You love control. And now that you've lost it, you're panicking." She reached for me again, and this time I let her fingertips brush against my arm before I stepped back, shaking my head. "Jake, please. We have a life together. You can't just throw it all away." I exhaled slowly. "Lindsay, I already did." For a long moment, she just stood there, blinking at me like she couldn't comprehend the reality sinking in. Then, in an instant, her grief twisted into rage. "You're pathetic," she spat, her voice trembling. "You think you won? You think you're some kind of hero?" I shrugged. "Don't need to be a hero. Just need to be free." Her face contorted, her hands clenching and unclenching at her sides. No one's ever going to love you like I did. This time I did laugh. God, I hope not. She let out a choked noise, half a sob, half a growl, before spinning on her heel and storming back toward her car. The tires screeched as she sped off into the night. I stood in the doorway for a long time, watching until her taillights disappeared. Then I stepped back inside, locking the door behind me. The silence didn't feel suffocating anymore. It felt peaceful. I walked back to the kitchen, picked up my drink, and took another slow sip. I had no idea what came next. Divorce papers, legal battles, the messy process of untangling our lives. But for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of it. The morning after Lindsay's meltdown, I woke up to an unusual feeling, relief. No tightness in my chest, no walking on eggshells, no waking up dreading the next passive-aggressive comment or backhanded insult. Just quiet. Peaceful, unshaken quiet. I got out of bed, stretched, and made myself a cup of coffee, taking my time as I stared out the kitchen window. It hit me then. This was the first morning in years where I wasn't waiting for an argument to start. No pointed remarks, no sighs heavy with disappointment, no forced conversations. Just me, the silence, and the knowledge that I was finally done with Lindsay. And then my phone rang. I didn't even need to check the screen. I already knew who it was. Lindsay. I let it ring. It stopped. A few seconds later, it started again. And again. By the fourth call, I sighed and picked up. What do you want, Lindsay? There was silence on the other end. Then a sharp breath. Jake, she started, her voice hoarse like she had been crying all night. We need to talk. No, I said simply. We don't. Jake, please, she pleaded. I know I messed up, but we have to at least talk about this. We can fix things. I took a sip of my coffee, letting the heat ground me. Lindsay, I don't know how to say this in a way that'll finally get through to you, but I'll try one last time. There's no fixing this. We're done. A sharp, broken breath came through the receiver. You don't mean that. I let out a humorless laugh. I do. Jake, please, we can go to therapy. We can work through this. I cut her off, my patience wearing thin. Therapy? Now, you want therapy? Lindsay, I spent years asking you to meet me halfway, to treat me with even a shred of respect, and you laughed in my face. You tore me down every chance you got. And now that you've been exposed, now that everyone sees you for what you are, you suddenly care. She was silent. That's what I thought. Jake, please, she whispered. I don't know what to do. I need you. That was it. That was the real truth. She didn't love me. She never had. She loved control. And now that I was no longer under her thumb, she had nothing. Not my problem, I said, and then I hung up. The rest of the day, I ignored her calls. The texts came in waves, desperate apologies, long-winded justifications, then sudden swings into anger. How could you do this to me? I made one mistake, and you're throwing everything away? You're a coward. I read them all with a detached sort of amusement. If she thought guilt-tripping me was going to work, she was about to be very disappointed. By the afternoon, I was sitting in my lawyer's office, handing over every piece of evidence I had, screenshots of her affair, financial records of her spending our money on another man, the messages she had sent me in her desperate attempt to manipulate me. My lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Kelly, skimmed through the files with a satisfied nod. This is good, she said. Really good. Given the proof of infidelity and misuse of shared funds, we can leverage this to ensure you get the best possible outcome. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. What does that look like? Well, she said, tapping her pen against the desk. For starters, we can make sure she gets as little as possible in the divorce. Since she used joint funds for her affair, we can argue financial misconduct. That works in your favor. A slow grin tugged at the corner of my mouth. Perfect. She's going to fight this, Kelly warned. Women like her, they don't take losing well. I'm counting on it, I said. Over the next few weeks, Lindsay did exactly what I expected her to do. She played the victim. She ran to mutual friends, sobbing about how I had blindsided her, how she had made a mistake, but that I was being cruel by refusing to work through it. She painted herself as the woman who had simply lost her way, while I was the cold, unforgiving husband who had abandoned her. Some people bought it. Others didn't. I got calls from friends, real friends, who saw her right through her act. Dude, I can't believe she thought she could pull that crap and just get away with it. Man, I've seen the way she talks to you for years. You deserve better. If you need anything, just say the word. And then there was her family. I knew they'd come knocking, and they did. First her mother, then her sister, then her father. All of them had the same message. Jake, don't throw away everything you've built together. I stared at her father as he sat across from me in my living room, hands clasped together like he was a wise old man offering sage advice. Everything we built? I repeated, voice eerily calm. Tell me, did you ever see the way your daughter treated me? Did you ever hear the things she said to me? He shifted uncomfortably. Lindsay can be passionate. She doesn't always think before she speaks. Right, I said dryly. Passionate. That's one way to describe it. She loves you, Jake. No, I said. She loves having someone to break. His expression darkened. I hope you don't think you're coming out of this clean, son. Lindsay is hurting. You humiliated her in front of the whole world. Do you think she's going to let that go? I stared at him, unblinking. I'm counting on it. I stood, walking to the door and pulling it open. We're done here. He hesitated, like he wanted to say something else, but then he sighed and walked out. That was the last time I saw Lindsay's family. By the time the divorce papers were officially filed, Lindsay was in full meltdown mode. She tried everything, begging, threatening, even trying to seduce me one night when she accidentally showed up at my house wearing something low-cut and tragic. I looked her dead in the eye and shut the door in her face. The divorce was brutal, just like Kelly had predicted. Lindsay fought tooth and nail, trying to squeeze every last cent out of me, but the evidence of her affair was ironclad. In the end, she walked away with nothing but the clothes on her back and the reputation of a woman who had destroyed her own life. And me? I walked away free. As I signed the final papers, Kelly grinned. Well, Jake, congratulations. You're officially a single man. I exhaled slowly, letting the weight of it all sink in. For the first time in years, I wasn't Jake, the husband who wasn't enough. I wasn't Jake, the man Lindsay kept in a cage of manipulation and mind games. I was just Jake, and that was more than enough. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.